You're listening to the Cantina Cast. Your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Adler and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 378, Devil's Deal. Zut à l'heure. We are back in French territory with the Twi'leks and the return of Harris and Duel. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch the episode by now. It's Monday, July 12th, so you should have watched it. But it was an episode that I think had a lot of fair criticism in a lot of different ways, but was it a good episode? I think that's what we're going to try to get down to tonight. And to help me do that is none other than our very own resident French expert, Le Jonesy. Jonesy, how are you doing tonight?
Welcome to the Cantina Cast, or the Gotana Cast.
Yeah.
We already have people asking about looking for Gotans.
Gotans?
Yeah.
If they are in this episode, and I have not had a chance to look, they're going to be in that opening scene with all the crowds of people. I'm hoping
that's going to take some time.
Yeah, I'm hoping that there's one just hidden there.
It's going to be a real Where's Waldo? Where's Gotan?
While we're doing this episode, I'm going to
oh my goodness,
in between breaks, just take a look and see if I can find one.
Right. This is so no joke. This is what Albert does like in real life. Like every 5 seconds, if you go on a tangent, you're talking like right now, he's literally watching the show, scanning the thing.
Yep. Looking for Gotans.
This happens all the time. God bless you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. It's the God's work, so somebody's got to do it.
Right.
How are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well.
Good.
Rain can kind of stop now, but whatever.
Yeah,
as soon as it stops down here, it becomes really nasty and humid, so it's not cool.
Not cool at all.
But it's actually beautiful right now. It's great. Like in the low 80s. Anyway, we're waxing poet about Houston weather because it's usually pretty crappy. But
it is pretty crappy usually.
What about you, man?
Doing good. There's I got a little bit of I was just telling Jonesy before we came on the air. He told me not to spoil it. I went to my local Goodwill.
Oh, it's gonna be good.
And I found something that I've always wanted, and I got it for $3.99. It is the hardback edition of Revenge of the Sith by Matthew Stover.
That's in good shape too.
Pretty good shape. Yeah, I mean it's awesome. I mean, there's no markings in it. The spine's good, it's intact. But yeah, $3.99. I've never had the hardback, so that's going to get added to the collection. It's up there as far as one of my favorite Star Wars novels ever.
Very nice.
Just because of the amount of extra bonus content you get from the book that you don't get in the movie. But
right.
So yeah, heck of a deal there.
Generally one of the better like movie to novel books we've had, period.
Oh yeah.
I think in a lot of different franchises. And then you got another book in the mail while you were out this weekend.
I got two in the mail. Well, I got one before I left for vacation, which was this one. So this is the Rising Storm.
Man, that looks sharp.
With that cover that everybody thinks is awesome. I do like it.
It is amazing.
And I have my little handbag over there. I don't know what I'm going to do with that just yet.
Tote bag.
Yeah. I may convert that into like a pair of boxers or something. And then the other one I got while I was away was the official. Now we had I don't have it over here. It's actually in the other room, but we got the preview version that's got the red bar on the top that says it's not for sale or whatever. It's still an early copy. But this is the actual final version of Justina Ireland's Out of the Shadows, which we've not had a chance to talk about, and we really can't. Well, I think we can. We can talk generally about it. We can't really spoil anything. What's the date on this one?
Later this month. I think it's later this month.
Yeah, they usually say on sale July 27th.
So, yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So it is a great complimentary book to both the Rising Storm and Race to Crash Point Tower. More of the Rising Storm because, again, Crash Point Tower is kind of a story within the story. And this is all the fallout. This is the aftermath. This is like really, I don't mean this in a negative way by any means, but it is like a really great and long epilogue to the events from the Rising Storm. And it sets up what I expect to be in phase 3, or wave 3, I should say. Wave 3 that's coming up. And we should get that announcement, by the way. I don't know if you caught that. Sometime this month, they're going to do something. I think it's the end of July or
that's
the date now. So.
Yeah, they keep dropping hints that we're going to get more. So that's really exciting. and I can't wait. I'm usually a few days behind getting my copy, so I'm excited to get it in. I've got my collection slowly building up here of
Oh, nice. Yeah.
some of the other ones, but yeah. Well, I mean, another interesting news on that one. So Daniel Jose Older and Kevin Scott, both on the New York Times bestseller list in the top 10. I think for their respective groups. Kevin Scott for the kind of the primary adult, and then Daniel Jose Older was it for young adult?
Yes.
Right. And so Daniel Jose is the trifecta for him, right? Where he's been on each of the bestseller lists for different levels of reading, right?
Yes, for different genres, I guess.
Yeah. So that's fantastic. I mean, it's really exciting. They've been exchanging things on Twitter all last week and throughout the weekend, but man, really exciting. And it's a really cool time to be a Star Wars fan right now. I mean, we've just got some great content that people are obviously enjoying and loving as much as maybe we got off to a bit of a uncertain start. And we are really starting to hit a good stride here. And I'm with you. As soon as we rip the band-aid off what the next wave is going to look like, I mean, things are already serious. I can only imagine how serious they're about to really get.
Yep. Yeah, no, I would agree. There's a lot going on with the books and TV shows, a lot of stuff that's coming out, and the comics are off to a great start. We're in the eras that I don't think either one of us thought we would ever be in, even as far back as just 2-3 years ago. So
right, yeah, we talked about doing a Patreon show about this too. Is if we're entering this new golden era of Star Wars publishing in general, we've had really great, strong Star Wars publishing, but this feels really different. I think about the only comparison we might have would be like a new Jedi Order type of comparison. But this feels just way different. And I don't know if it's because I'm in a different place with my fandom or whatnot, but so it's something we might revisit here pretty soon in Patreon. So if you want to go over there and zoom over and check that out, patreon.com/thecantinacast. We've also put our comic, Albert and I have both done a comic episode, and not a comedian episode, but actual comic book episode. And we've actually bumped those down to the After Dark tier so people can have a listen. So we've done that for a limited time. If you want to go check out Albert's new one on the first issue of the High Republic flagship comic, which is, of course, been written by Kevin Scott, and you did a great job of kind of explaining, bringing us through kind of what you expected going into it and your trepidations about it, and really how it's turning out. So that was really, really fun to listen to. And
thank you.
And we did War of the Bounty Hunters as well. So some different comics, different perspectives on that. So if you want to go check those out, those are on the $2 tier for a limited time. We'd love to get your feedback on it, and hopefully you'll want to hear more of that stuff.
Yeah, feedback is appreciated, good or bad, because honestly, we want the Patreon content to be what you want and not what we want. I know that sounds weird because I always say, well, it's really up to the creators to do it. But, we're not Disney, and I'm not, Rian Johnson. So, I'd like to make sure that it's at least stuff that you are interested in watching or listening to. And there's a lot of work. Both Jonesy and I put a lot of work into those. And, if you feel like, hey, this is too much, or it's good enough with just the voice, that's fine. But we've got music in these things, and
Albert did some nice panels and everything else. So we're trying to step up the video game a little bit and do some stuff.
The
that was
video
real
game, not
the video
game.
Yeah,
right. Just make sure.
Hey, don't get into me about word and phrasing semantics after your little Patreon stint. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. Hey,
sorry, inside jokes. They're terrible.
Yep.
Bad podcasting, live streaming, whatever we are now.
Let's get back to talking about novels and the news, because as you all know, Star Wars Visions is coming out, and we got that preview last week. Did we talk? Yeah, we did. We talked about that in the last show, but then
we did.
A few days later, we got word that there was actually a novel coming out. So this novel is called Star Wars Visions Ronin. What's the full story? It's Star Wars Ronin, a Visions novel is the full title.
We are going to make the titles of everything so long now in Star Wars, because we have to say Star Wars, and then we have to preface what the grouping of it all is: High Republic, Ronin, whatever.
Yep.
And then
do we
have to say it's a novel? I guess there might be confusion with the TV show.
Oh, yeah, good point. No, I don't think it's that. I think it's just to separate it from the actual, to show that it's tied to the Visions TV, because this really is. So getting back to what this is about, there is a Visions episode that we talked about called The Duel. And at its heart, it is really probably the most like traditional, and I say traditional only in the sense of what samurai were and what Ronin were in that kind of feudal era of Japan, only in that sense. I don't know if there's, because it's Star Wars, we're going to have to, have droids and lightsabers and all that in it, right? But there was enough there just to kind of wrap up with there's an article on StarWars.com that talks about how when they saw that, they realized there was a whole lot of stuff that happened before the story that they're going to tell in the Visions episode. And there's probably a lot of story after that as well. And so they approached the creators and said, hey, would you be interested in creating a novel based on this? And I think they've got Emma Miko Candon as the writer. I don't know what she's done. I don't know how well established she is, because I've not had a chance to look into all that. But it is enough that they're going to release this novel. And so far, they're kind of talking. And of course, they're hyping this up. But they're talking as though, hey, this is something we've never done before. And it's like it's unlike any novel. I mean, the fact that it's in the Visions universe, if you will, or multiverse, then it kind of tells you it's probably going to be very, very different than what we're used to. But this looks pretty exciting. I mean, just on the storyline, and I don't want to ruin anything. Go take a look at and read up on the Duel and certainly what this is about. But essentially, you've got somebody who's like a Vader character who is, or maybe that's more of a Maul, because if you look at his lightsaber, it looks like Darth Maul's lightsaber. You notice that?
It's very interesting. I think what's really the Visions has been touted as such a visual experience, right? I mean, that's what we've been drawn to. I mean, no pun intended. So for us to get a novel set in that quote unquote style is really interesting. It's a different shift because they're not saying this is a graphic novel or anything like that. So it's going to be a potentially very different, reading experience for us, and not in you get yourself in a different frame of mind for a comic book, but an actual very different novel reading experience and novel in all the different ways. I think that's really cool. One thing I wanted to ask you though about this, there's been debate lately about canon, right? Canon and how it fits. Does it fit? Are these the real characters? Are they just takes on them? Can they coexist? Do they coexist? What have you made from all of that stuff?
Well, I think with the Visions, it's pretty clear. Like, I think I saw, and it wasn't in an article, it's on Twitter. I think a lot of the creators have already kind of come out. The creators being the Lucasfilm creators, and saying that no, Visions is not canon. It is a totally separate thing. There's no reason they put no restrictions or no restraints on these authors. So they could do whatever, anything they wanted. They wanted them to really just focus on their craft and the art of storytelling, but with Star Wars in mind. And so for some people, that may be completely, a non-factor in determining whether or not they're going to watch this. They may hate that idea. I know there are people out there that already hate this idea because it could be anything. It's just got a Star Wars label slapped onto it, right? That's that perspective. The other perspective is, well, these are kind of like the what ifs, or they're kind of like the Star Wars. What was the one that Dark Horse did, where they did the Ultraverse things, right? Where
Infinities,
Infinities, right? Where Luke misses, he does not blow up the Death Star, and Alderaan, or the Rebel base, gets blown up. And so and then that was kind of showing you a chain of events that happened later on that kind of got us to the same path, but how we got there, or got us to the final, I guess, end goal. But the path was vastly different, starkly different. And that stuff is really fascinating to me. We tried to do our own what if story, show one time, and that had, varying degrees of success depending on how you looked at it. But that stuff is very interesting. I think there's an audience for it. So Visions allows that to happen. Now, as far as canon in general, like just going back to the Lucasfilm canon, I think we are kind of seeing, I don't want to say backpedaling, but I think they're kind of reassessing what it means to be canon. In this episode alone, we've got a change to Senator Ta that goes against Lords of the Sith. Maybe, I don't know. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But there have been plenty of examples recently here, whether it's in comics or the TV shows, The Bad Batch, Clone Wars, where they've made changes, and it goes against what novels are. So I think it's probably safe to say that nothing's changed, because I think that the official line from Lucasfilm, even in this Disney era, as far back as 2 years ago, at least, not when they came out in 2015, but at least as of 2 years ago, they were publicly stating that movies and TV shows are canon. Everything's canon, but if there's ever if ever there's a discrepancy or something that contradicts, you always take the movie or the TV version first, or it kind of nullifies the other books or comics or whatever else. And again, I get it. Some people don't like that. It was much easier. I think we were all kind of going into this era of, wow, we can finally break free of the chains that were once these different tiers and levels of canon, and trying to keep all that in our head and make sense of it all. I think we felt really great about that going into 2015. Sounds good on paper, but Star Wars is just too big. There's too many characters, too many stories. Things are going to contradict. It's a huge task for the story group to keep all of that stuff together and make sure that these authors aren't doing that, while at the same time balancing the ability for these authors and creators to kind of tell the stories they want to tell. Right at the end of the day, they're going to always side with telling the best story they can, kind of in that hierarchy order. So I know that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's kind of my, I guess, overall thoughts and feelings about.
Yeah, and it doesn't. And I think what threw a little gas on the fire was it Del Rey or the Star Wars books? One of the Twitter accounts said that just because it's not canon doesn't mean it didn't happen.
That's
which I think is the thing that
it's probably more confusing. Yeah.
Yeah, that really kind of threw people's noodles in a loop there. They couldn't quite figure out what that actually meant. Does that mean you are actually, is it potential canon then, or you will canonize it later? And I think that ambiguity that gives people a certain amount of maybe unease or just discomfort. But I'm with you. I don't need everything to be canon. I think we've talked about this extensively at times of, we don't need everything to be canon as long as it's a good, fun, interesting Star Wars story. Does it quote unquote feel like Star Wars? I don't have to have it all mean something in a grand narrative. It's nice when it does. It's preferable when it does. But then again, some stories are just fun to be fun. Why not? And if we got Rogue One without it being necessarily canon, we probably would have still loved Rogue One because it was just good, right? Especially the last 50 minutes. So, but anyway, I just want to get your take on it. It was something a little bit interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk about that here again some more, and I'm sure it's going to constantly keep coming up for us.
Especially as we dig into these areas that we keep flirting and touching every time we can make a connection somewhere. New Patreon subscriber. So great segue. Aria, thank you so much for coming into the After Dark tier. We really appreciate you coming in, and I believe Ari joined our Discord server as well. So
he did.
Yeah, love having you guys out there. I'm really excited. We have more women coming into the community as well, and that's super exciting for us. We've been trying to make sure it's an inclusive environment for everyone to feel comfortable, and that's really nice. We're
I don't
getting
want
more.
To be a good old boys club. I'm still looking for a Gotan.
Oh my goodness! I told you, people.
Yeah, but no,
Albert he's predictable.
I am. I'm nothing if not predictable. But thank you for again, Ari for joining. I said Ashley, Ari for joining our Patreon, and we'll get to that here in a little bit because we'll talk about what our Patreon topic is going to be. And the title especially. So, okay, let's get into the moment you've all been waiting for painfully. That is the...
Albert has found the Gotan.
No, episode 378. No, but I will come in, break. I don't care if you're talking mid-sentence. If I find this sucker, I'm breaking in with the news update. So
he's not kidding.
This is episode 378, Devil's Deal. And I think the devil here is obviously the Galactic Empire, but we've always heard in Star Wars that the true devil is the Emperor. And so, I mean, and to some extent, it is an extension of the Emperor himself, right? The Galactic Empire is his whole thing. So that's kind of really what it's going on. You could say the devil was, what's his face?
Rampart.
Rampart, yeah. But I think there's a larger meaning to all of this. But give me your overall thoughts, because I know, again, I kind of kicked this whole episode off with, I've seen a lot of chatter. I've not seen a lot. I haven't really been online very much the last couple of days, but from what I did see, there was a lot of chatter in there about whether or not this was a good episode and whether it was a fair episode and where the heck were the Bad Batch and why do they call it the Bad Batch when they're not in this episode, and people varying opinions about whether, again, if it was good or not. But what were your overall thoughts? And I mean, I've got my own, but how did you feel about it?
Overall,
it's different. Sorry.
It was very different. Yeah. And I liked the episode overall. I don't know that it felt like the Bad Batch, like an episode of the Bad Batch that we've had. And the more I watched it, the more comfortable I got that it fit into it. It felt more like really more like a Clone Wars episode, really an epilogue to the Clone Wars, more than anything else. And I think I put in the notes, really what it felt like is Seeds of Rebellion, right? If we were to have a show called Seeds of Rebellion, these are the types of stories that we would start to see, right? Or we would see like the Kanan story. Now we have the Hera story, maybe even some of the Rex, type of stuff, right? And so I understand people why they've been a little bit up in arms about it, because everything has been so focused around the Bad Batch. And I know we sometimes leave Crosshair off off the map a little bit, but really we're talking about the core team that we see, Wrecker, Tick, Echo, Hunter, and Omega. And we're just, we're usually focused right on them because that's who we see almost every single scene. We see one of them doing it. And so for them to be completely, well, more or less gone is very disorienting. And I think it's difficult to, if you were to kind of come into this episode, you're like, well, why is it called the Bad Batch? And I think the criticism is fair to an extent, but I think it's also another one of these shows where you've got to see what comes next to really see how it fit. So I'm reserving judgment, too harsh a judgment on that, because it was good. These characters are really good. Corey Burton, he did the voice, he's the voice for Cad Bane. Of course, he does the voice for Gobi Glee. And I could just listen to this guy talk all day, I'm pretty sure. And he's just fantastic. But I want to see the next episode because clearly we're sticking with it, most likely, because, and we'll speculate a bit, what comes next. But overall, it was good. I like that we got a little bit of a backstory for Hera. It does raise some other questions about some of the in-between here. But I'll pause there because we're going to get into a lot of this throughout the show. What were your kind of initial thoughts coming out of the first viewing or second viewing?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a little conflicted on this one. Or I shouldn't say I'm conflicted. I think I'm clear on my stance and how my initial thoughts, and even after seeing it a few times, where I kind of stand with this. And I think overall, I think you're 100% right in terms of this is very similar to the kind of the opinion and the views we had going into like The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. We know this is part of a larger narrative here, whether it's 2 episodes, 3 episodes, whatever the case is, right? There's a longer picture here. There's a longer story, and this is kind of like Act 1. It's the setup for, hopefully what's going to be a big payoff here in the next 2 or 3 episodes, depending on how long this arc is. So from that perspective, you're right. I think it's too early to say whether or not this is the best episode, an incredible episode, good, bad, whatever, or indifferent. Personally, I think for me, I like Rebels, and being able to see Hera and Chomper and the connections there all kind of fit really well with me. They sit well with me because it is, these are all stories by Dave Filoni. This is not unusual for Filoni, and it's not unusual for Star Wars. Star Wars has always had characters that were all tied together, or these connections that were kind of all tied together. And I can think of Clone War episodes. Now, fairly, I don't remember if there was any in season 1 that were really not about necessarily Anakin and Obi-Wan, but you could argue that the Clone Wars is Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka, right? Mm-hmm. And there are episodes, plenty of episodes, where they may or were not in it, but at all, right? They had very small bits and pieces. I think there's a couple in there where they weren't in it at all, completely. And it was because it was all kind of part of a larger story, a larger narrative that Filoni was trying to tell. So from that angle, it's no different than the Clone Wars. Like, the only difference would be that, this is season 1 and we're only 11 episodes in. Is it too soon? I don't know. With Clone Wars, you had a lot. It was probably a few seasons in before they actually got to something like that. So that's point number 2. And then I guess my third point is, for me, the Bad Batch. And I think I said it in Twitter today, and I wasn't trying to come across as pretentious anyway, but I said, for anyone unhappy, quote, the Bad Batch only had one scene last episode until Crosshair is one with the Force, then he's always going to be part of the Bad Batch. I said, this series is about all of them, not just some of them. And so if you think about it from that angle, we got quite a bit of Crosshair. Like, we've had more Crosshair in this episode than we did in some of the other ones, with the exception of maybe the first one. But this was a chance to see what's going on with him. And so and it's easier for me to say that when I truly believe that at some point stuff's not going to work for him and he's going to get converted back over, or he's going to have a redemption arc or something like that. We're going to look back and say, okay, well, yes, the other guys, the core group that we're all used to seeing for the last 10 episodes, were not in this, but for all of almost 2 minutes. I think you literally have the time in there in terms of how long they were on screen. But if you count up the times that Crosshair was in there and the impact that he had and what we got to see him doing on the other side, it was kind of like, okay, they're just trying to show you that he is part of the Bad Batch, and here's what was going on before he has that redemption arc, before he kicks the bucket, or before he has, he's liberated and rescued and all of that stuff. So I think that becomes important. Again, it goes back to the content, the context of the narrative that they're trying to teach or tell. So those are my thoughts, but I don't I see it all ways.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I think one of the interesting things about Crosshair, though, that I think may have softened the blow would have been if he had more development in this episode. We see what he's up to. We thought after the last episode where he took the injury, and I was glad that we got to see the injury. He doesn't have as much hair. He doesn't have the scar. But we were maybe thinking, well, maybe we'll see something different. Well, last week, nope, he's chasing him and shooting after him. We thought, well, maybe he's not, maybe he's pulling some punches. Didn't really look like it, but maybe. And this week, nope, he's really a bad guy right now. Yeah. Like through and through and through. And there doesn't seem to be any hesitation in what he's doing. Now we see it in other characters, which I thought was far more interesting than anything Bad Batch related this episode. But yeah, I think I think had we seen a little more from Crosshair, not necessarily screen time, but in just a developmental way or something that brought our attention to him. Right now, he kind of feels like a hired hand, and maybe that's intentional, and it could very well be intentional. It would make total sense too, right? But I want to, again, that's why we have to see where this goes. I'm with you. We have to see Crosshair really. I mean, I think we've seen enough to where it would be enough to start turning him back around. And maybe now that we're getting into those last handful of episodes, we might see something like that. But it's important to really establish that Crosshair really is a baddie at this point.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we've kind of waxed on a little bit about that. But I think the galaxy, you had a question in here, is the galaxy too small? Is it too connected? I have been critical about this at times because it really does feel like everything is touching. The galaxy is not small. The galaxy is big, but everybody seems to have these connect points. So are they just that important? Is this, I mean, here's where you really sound like Star Wars nerddom, right? Is the Force really connecting all of them in these special ways, type of thing? You have to really sell yourself and be kind of hardcore into that in order to get to that point. I understand where some people might have a harder time with that, especially if they're a bit more casual fans, and then they're like, well, everybody seems to be related to everybody. But I think this is a really good one, though. I like that we followed up with Ryloth. I think that was important to see what happens with Ryloth, because we know the struggles of it throughout the Clone Wars. We know what we see in Rebels. Where else are you going to have this opportunity? And I think that's probably what Dave Filoni said. Where else am I going to have this opportunity to revisit this storyline unless you did like a Rex type of show or something else right outside of it? So when I saw how it fit like that, I'm like, okay, I like the story, so why not? Let's fit it in.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree.
Hopefully I did not completely contradict myself with the last 2 minutes.
Well, no, maybe, but
it's hard.
Yeah. I think you're able to see kind of both views and both sides. So expressing that, there's nothing wrong with that. I guess just two quick other points that I had about this episode before we get into it. There was one, we've been talking about. In fact, I think we've got a Patreon episode that we're going to do here shortly about whether or not. The change, right? Going back to Saul Guerrera's comment in the very first episode about either you change and adapt, or you die with the past kind of thing. And we're still seeing a lot of that in almost every single episode. There's an example of it, and that's kind of what that Patreon episode. It's not the one for this episode, but it's kind of we've got another episode that we've got to do because we're kind of backlogged on those. But that's one of them. And in this episode, it was the same thing. We're seeing some of that, but I think this one really does challenge that a little bit and says, okay, yes, you've got to adapt and change, but at what cost?
Right.
At what point do you have to say, I can't cross this line, even though, because it's going to have, deeper ramifications or repercussions, or, sometimes these decisions that we're making become purely selfish in a way, right? You're now not thinking about others, you're thinking about yourself, Cham and Duel, which we'll get to here in a little bit, right? So that's part of it. And then you had asked the question about whether this is an important backstory to get. And I don't know yet. I don't, that's a great question. And I think that's kind of, again, to be determined. We know with like Harris and Dula, by the time we get to her in Rebels, she and her father are not on the best talking terms. I think at one point he calls her, or she calls him. He's like, I was not expecting you, of all people, to kind of call me. Right. So we know they had a falling out. And we also know that her mom's not around at the time. So maybe we're going to see some of that. And I think we're going to see, probably, surprisingly, we'll probably see some of Cham go through some character development here in the next episode or two, depending on how that continues to develop. So, yeah, whether it's the episode we need right now, is it an important backstory? It could very well be with Dave Filoni. Again, space whales. That's all I got to say, right? He puts that story in there. Everybody mocks it. Everybody hates it. What do you know? Whether you like it or not, it was significant because it played off. The big payoff was at the very end of that series. So we'll see. There's probably some things in there that he's laid down.
Yeah, I think, and I know we beat this to death, but I think the other thing is to perspective wise, this is the period of momentum to get to rebellion. So this is the period of the growth of rebellion and how quickly it happens, even though it takes a long time to develop. This is where you get the seeds of all of that. This is where it begins. This is where all of those first steps start to happen in decisions. And I like how you put it earlier. This episode really plays it perfectly about how do you balance your interests, and we don't get it just in Cham. We see it in others too, and so to make for an interesting conversation. All right, so let's go into it a little bit. How about that?
Let's do that. Oh wait, Patreon episode. So the one for the Patreon episode for this one, I called the title "Cameo No" or "Oh Yes." So I know that's horrible, but the idea here was whether or not there are too many cameos in the series or in Star Wars right now. We see a lot of characters popping up, even in the High Republic. There's characters that are popping up that we're familiar with in our era, if you want to call it that, or future eras. I won't name any names. I almost spoiled one of them, but there are. This pops up a lot, and I kind of alluded to this, that this is always it's been a reoccurring theme. I get why some people feel like, okay, that too much is too much. I know blurgs were in this one. You're like, holy bananas, right? Blurgs again. I don't know if that's really the same. We'll come to that. We'll say
no,
that. It's not. I mean, it's Filoni going, I'm going to find a way to get a blurg in this episode or in the series, right? And that checks the box, and we probably won't ever see them again. That's just a funny thing going on. That's very different than a Hera or a Kanan coming in, right? That's a very different kind of impact emotionally as well. So, that's what we're going to get into with Patreon, is just whether or not there's too many cameos, and is the galaxy really is it starting to feel a little too small for how big things are really truly in the grand scheme of perspective of what a galaxy or even a universe is, which is a whole nother topic. But that's our Patreon, and we'll cover that here when we're done with this episode. Okay, you ready to do this?
Let's do it.
All right, 32 minutes in. This is the longest it's ever taken us to start.
Hey, this is good. This is necessary grounding for the conversation.
It is very true.
See, SP agrees with me. It's good world building.
World building.
This is what we're doing on the show too. We're world building before we get into the episode.
Yeah. Well, Rhys Bayless has got it right.
That's right.
Hauser's the man. I didn't want to bring him up, but he's awesome. We're going to talk about him.
I just want to say, I want Mike to come on the show just to say, hauser. Hauser.
I don't know how he would. Hauser. That's probably what it would be. Hauser.
He'd probably call him like, Hoppy or something. Weird.
Get it wrong.
All right, let's do this.
Enough. All right. So we open up in Ryloth, where the Empire, or specifically Crosshair, is tracking Gobi Glee and his fighters. And this is the same Gobi Glee that we saw in the Clone Wars, and then later on he comes out in Rebels. So he's been around for forever.
Animation looked really different, though.
He does look different. Yes.
I love this character model, though. I think this looks great, but he is very different than every other place we've seen him.
I mean, honestly, if they had not said his name, I would have never thought that he was the same character in Clone Wars or Rebels, for that matter.
Right.
But yeah, so, and of course, there's, we've got, was it Senator Orn Free is up there. It's Orn Free Ta's up there, and he's giving a speech. And I mean, he's always been a dirtbag in this whole series, right? I mean, he's the nasty Twi'lek, and he's always been at odds with Cham. This is stuff that we got in the Clone Wars. They're kind of vying for power. He's always felt threatened by Cham, because Cham's the guy that all the people love, and they look at him as the true leader, whereas he's the one actually with the title, but doesn't hold any power and doesn't really seem to understand how to, earn the trust and earn the respect of his people, which kind of chews at him. So
yeah, and throughout this episode, we see Ta continuing to try to assert some sort of authority, often over Cham, especially, or jump on the Cham, whatever it is. But he has this speech coming out here, basically that the Empire is going to take care of us. It's going to be great. But then we have the people just chanting for Cham, like what does Cham think? We need to hear him, and you could just see the discontent on Orn Free Ta. It really comes out later in the episode.
Yeah, he's not happy with that at all. I mean, this is his moment to shine. He's up there in front of, he's got Rampart behind him. He's got now the backing of the Empire. They've come in. They've, quote, created all these jobs, which is BS. He's got everything going for him, and he gets up there, and this is his big moment to shine in front of his people. It's a new chapter, all that stuff, and they're essentially booing him, right? I mean, they're not so much. I think there were some boos I could hear coming out of there. Yeah, so they're not happy with him. They haven't been happy with him in a long time. They're certainly not happy with the fact that now they're here and the Empire's here, and they kind of, Rampart seems really upset, and he even challenged them, like, hey, they're not really happy after we brought all these jobs, and pull the Band-Aid off. They didn't bring jobs in there. They've got basically indentured servants. They've got people they can get to go and do a lot of labor to build their super weapon, and they're going to disguise this as, we're bringing jobs to them. But at the end of the day, once that's done, I guarantee you they have every intention of just ripping all the mining out of that stuff, taking all the resources and then getting out of there and leaving them for dead.
And I get the feeling that Rampart is testing both Ta, but really Rampart is testing Cham Syndulla throughout the entire episode.
Yeah,
and I think that's what this was, because he had this very, pretentious type of tone to his voice. I'm disappointed, Senator, type of thing. But you could just tell it's all a ploy to see how Cham is going to respond and what Cham is going to do. And we find out a little bit later that Born Free Ta has basically prefaced all of this with Rampart saying that, Cham's going to be difficult. Cham's going to be hard to work with. You get that dissent already, that rub between them. But to his credit, Cham's like, no, we are ready. We have to show them that we're ready for peace. We have to be able to lay down our arms. You can tell he's uncomfortable with where this is all going. But I guess to recap, the Empire wants them to turn in all their weapons and basically disband the militia and the military.
Right.
And so now they will be completely defenseless, which of course is giving Gobi Glee heartburn. And he is very unhappy about that because he feels that's very suspicious. But this is all very apparent. Ta's a puppet. Cham has all, and they still call him General Cham Syndulla. But you get Ta's, his greed comes through too. Cham's talking about peace and he genuinely means it. And Ta's like, wow, with peace comes prosperity. He's already looking to see how he can gain from this, or how he's probably already gained from all of this. And so he's just, like he said, he's just scum. And, but what was really interesting was the thing that happened next with Hauser and Cham. And they're pretty chummy, don't you think?
Yeah, I think they are. And I think we're going to get more of this a little bit later. And we'll get into Hauser. I think we both probably got the same opinion about where he's at, or at least we've got questions about where he's at. And I mean, where he's at mentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
He acts different than all the clones. He talks differently. He takes his helmet off. He's still got the paint. He's not really, I mean, some of this is to set him apart so that you can tell who he is. But I mean, he could have easily just gone to a straight white and had that little shoulder thing on there, and maybe, I don't know. But the point is, he's definitely different. He's got a different feel than the other 066 stormtroopers or clones, right? So something's going on with him, and we'll break that down here in a little bit. But yeah, I would agree. They've got a personal relationship, and it's likely because they, as a general, he was following him. They've probably fought a lot of wars. He's probably been assigned to Ryloth for a number of years, and so they've got a history there. They've got a mutual level of respect, and that extends even to his family, which we'll see here in just a little bit as well. So this is all getting set up. This is all kind of happening before the speech. When that speech is done, or I guess when he's done, when you look at both of the speeches between Ta and Cham, they're really not that different. It's just it's the approach, right? Mm-hmm. It's the way they go about the speeches and the words they use. Ta speaks of stability, growth, and then, which are good, right? Stability, growth, great. And then he goes, and then the generosity of the Empire. Okay, so if you're a Twi'lek, you've got a level of pride, right? They've been fighting this war. They fought many wars before, as we find out in the Old Republic. Mm-hmm. They fought many wars before. I'm sorry, the High Republic, and in the Old Republic. But they're a prideful people. They don't feel like they need to have somebody come in and save them. And yes, the clone army did come in when they needed them. Cham even says it in his speech. We needed help. They came in and they helped us, and they helped turn the tide. But when you start saying the generosity of the Empire, I mean, that doesn't really sit well with a very proudful group of people. He talks about disarming and succumbing to the price of freedom, right? It's just the word choices that he has.
Right.
He talks about stepping down from, protecting themselves, basically the disarming, and we know that that's part of the Empire trying to remove guns from people so that they can't militia and they can't rise up against them. That's really what's kind of happening here.
Right.
And then I think where it really hits a lot of the people, the common folk, is he says the Empire will protect and defend us going forward. Somebody like, all of these guys, if they fought in the war, they're not going to want the Empire to just sit there and kind of protect them. And they're not defenseless, helpless people. They don't feel that way. So why do they need somebody else kind of coming in, this outsider suddenly taking over and doing all of that?
Right. And like you said, to Cham's credit, he focuses on the clone army itself, specifically. It says they came to our aid. They have earned our trust. They've earned our respect. They've earned his trust and respect. And so again, he brings it into he shrinks it for them and makes sure it feels more personal that, they've earned this. So why shouldn't we, the Republic was losing when they came to try to help us, and so it was just a sign of, and like you said, they did turn the tide. They did win back their freedom. So why would they not pay that back and embrace this peace? And I think to your point, you really made some good parallels there where, Orn Free Tao is basically, giving up things where Cham's really, his speech is more of embracing and bringing things in and lifting yourselves up and just, moving forward with change. And he says it a number of times in the episode that, change is never easy. And it sometimes happens much faster than you expect. And sometimes it's much harder and slower than you anticipated it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. He talks about unity. He empathizes with the people where Ta never did. He's empathizing and saying, look, I get it, right? This is very different. This feels different. And I feel the same way. And what he does, he's kind of catering to the fact that, okay, look, we may not trust this Empire because we don't know who they are, but this guy that just walked up that's standing next to me, you know him, you trust him. And so on that alone, right, on that measure, we probably should trust all of it because they're a part of it and we don't have any reason to doubt them. And that's really what he's doing. He's catering to the fact that they have that relationship. They fought alongside these clones. The clones are still there. Those people are still there. Even though the other people that are in charge are different, we can at least trust these guys, and that's probably enough for us to get started. Now, of course, this is all going to backfire, right? I mean,
sure,
they're about to find out that wasn't it. But for Cham, though, this is the sticky situation, the precarious position that he's in throughout this entire episode. He right now is completely focused on peace, almost at no cost, any cost, really. He's willing to give up some of this stuff because he's not thinking about the people, really. He's thinking about himself. More specifically, he's thinking about Hera, and he's thinking about his wife. He's doing what he needs to do because he even says it later. I don't want you to go through what I did. I don't want you to live a life of war. And I think you had the great point. It's like, well, that's inevitable and that's going to happen, right? But he's trying to prevent that from happening, and he's doing whatever he needs to. And if it means sacrificing some things, and even, I don't know, I won't say he's two-faced, but on one hand, yes, I see what he's doing. He's appealing to the people, and he's not being dishonest. But I think he knows that there are some things they are just going to have to give up. And he seems to be okay with that because he is really trying to walk this line of not ticking off the Galactic Empire and still be able to kind of live in an era of peace so long as everybody's getting along and all that. That's really what he wants. And this is, again, it's all going to go south here soon for him. But
and he's trying to convince himself on some level, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
I guess he I mean, like you said, he's really uncomfortable with all this, but he's just trying to convince himself that, yeah, we earned this peace. We should be able to enjoy this. Why would we not be able to enjoy peace that we have fought so hard and so long to earn? Why wouldn't we embrace it? We have to show people that we can embrace this. Then we're just not a people of war, effectively is what he's kind of saying. But it doesn't feel right. And Gobi Glee, he's unimpressed with all the speeches. Him and a couple of his crew end up walking off, right? Which of course continues to draw the attention of Crosshair and then the rest of the team kind of looking on these folks. But and then Rampart makes a pretty interesting conversation. He's asking, I think her name's Alina, right?
Alina.
Yeah, Cham's wife. There's a shame that Hera, her daughter wasn't there, and she says that Hera has other interests, which was curious because then of course we're gonna flash over and we see Chopper of all people, which was kind of a nice surprise, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure. I didn't really expect to see Chopper. I didn't think about that.
Well, I about screamed when I saw that little thing come up because it's just a very distinct color.
I bet Twan did too. Twan was probably like, wah.
Yeah.
Wah.
Twan's my Rebels buddy. I think he likes it just slightly more than I do. But and we'll come back to this as well, but I wonder how much Alina knows that Hera's involved and how much she's kind of behind a lot of this stuff. And um, she says things. She makes one comment a little bit later that makes you think, okay, she's definitely in the know and probably playing both sides here. And I say both sides meaning between uh, Gobi and Cham, right? I think she's kind of right towing the line between both of them there. But
Sure. Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, that was a really, I mean, okay, so first off, that was pretty shocking. I wasn't expecting to see Hera. We'll get into this a little bit later about is it too small and all that, but I mean, it makes sense. I didn't have a problem with it. I know there's been some discourse around her accent. It was a very strong kind of
It was.
French Twi'lek accent.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, as a kid, and this can be easily explained. If you've got an accent, I like to think I don't, but when I get around my family, especially down here in the South, and they're all, and I don't mean this in a bad way, they're Hispanic, and they've got some of them have very thick Hispanic accents. There's just something that comes out, and if you have an accent or you got family with accents, you probably know what I'm talking about. At the same time, I have friends that live up in North Texas, and when I go hang out with them, I don't know where I get a draw from, but I sure do sometimes when I'm talking, and it happens. You may not catch it, but it does happen. And I think it's like with my mom and dad, when I see them, I haven't seen them in forever. When I start talking to them within 5 minutes, I'm like talking a lot like they do. My accent just kind of comes out that, even though I don't have one, I don't think I do, but it's just weird. I don't know how to explain it.
You do. That Midwestern thing comes out every once in a while.
Yeah. I say apples and
yeah, you have that weird A thing going.
Yeah. The nasally A. Steph knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean I think that can be easily explained. But apart from that, seeing her and then the whole her wanting to fly and all that. I mean, that's great stuff, especially if you're a Hera fan, if you're a Rebels fan. I mean, I don't think you could have asked for anything more than that. And we know that Dave Filoni, I mean, this is his baby. He may not be writing it, but these are his stories, and he's going to include these characters because
he's got the GL stamp now.
I mean, it's like, what do you expect? This isn't the last time you're going to see her, and you're probably going to see other characters that he's created in other series as well.
Yeah, and I think it really, and SP was talking about, later in the episode where we get Omega and Hera sharing a moment, which I think was pretty powerful. And then this scene sets that up, with the hand drifting and the way that she sees flying and the way that she feels it. And it's part of who she wants to be. She feels like this is who she's meant to be. And you start to feel that already. And I think it's always touching whenever you get that type of a story from a kid. And it's really all she wants. And quite honestly, it might be the only reason why she's really hanging with Gobi Glee in the first place. And he kind of manipulates her a little bit later on. But but she's up on this ridge because Uncle Gobi has asked her to, what was the word? Not spy, but
gather intel. I don't know what
just
it was.
Gather intel. Yeah, gather information.
Yeah,
but,
he's kind of, on one hand, I mean, he likes the fact that he's got a protege in the making.
Right?
They're kind of grooming her to be the next generation of rebel, literally being a rebel, and whether it's teaching her to fly, teaching her espionage, this is a big influence for her, which is interesting because I never, you think about it, you would have thought a lot of what Hera learned was coming from her mom and her father, which still may be the case, but Gobi has a lot more influence. He seems to be kind of the person that really started to steer her in the directions of flying and being a rebel and all these like survival skills and life skills that she's picking up. Not so much her parents. I'm not saying they didn't do it, but he's definitely impactful, and that's something I would have never gotten or even thought of. So,
right.
But yeah, and so they get caught by the clones and they come in. This is where we get a lot of Hauser, really good stuff from Hauser here. But Gobi and is Eleni? I never got her name.
Eleni.
Eleni is her name.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is where they kind of have that speech, and we get more of the same, that mantra of, hey, we should be defending of ourselves. We shouldn't have the Galactic Empire coming in. And he says, to kind of fix all of this, my contact is going to be bringing us weapons. So we learn that they're taking weapons away from the Twi'leks and the people on Ryloth, and he's bringing them in. He says, I've got a contact. We know that contact is at this point Sid. And
wait. No, she's on the up and up.
I'm telling you, no, it's Sid. It's got to be.
Oh my gosh, gasp.
I'm sorry. Sarcasm. But So Sid then eventually is going to send out the Bad Batch, and that's how they get their weapons. So,
Right. Yep.
And so when at this point, they bring in Hera, and Hauser has got a very different approach. He's kind of like, if you ever watch the series Cops,
Yeah.
you've got these cops that are like really great people. And I know I'm not even going to get into any of the other stuff. This is not a political or social statement of any kind, but there are some really good cops out there on this show that are like, hey, look, I know things are tough, or this kid was just being dumb. Please talk to them. Not laying down the law, but just saying, look, we all make mistakes. We all do stupid things. This is part of growing up. This is part of development. Just try not to let it happen again. And that's how Hauser comes in. Now, that is very different. Like, I would have never thought a clone impacted by Order 66 would be doing that, right? Because, good soldiers follow orders. So it starts to really, it was very shocking to see him like that. And it started making me think, okay, so what's going on with him? Does he have a chip? Was the chip malfunctioning? Was he impacted by it? Is it starting to wear off? I think all of those are valid questions, but any thoughts around any of those? Any kind of theories that you're kind of leaning on heavier than the others?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's got he's so much more expressive than the other ones. He actually has a personality, which is completely unlike every single clone we've come across since Order 66. They are all just completely devoid of any kind of thought and any kind of empathy or anything, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, he's got the scar on his face. Is this the first time we've met Hauser?
I think so. I don't remember him, and I'm not to say I don't remember every clone, but I don't remember Hauser ever coming up.
Right. So I don't know that he would have got that at this stage because it was pretty well scarred over, but I mean, maybe it's not as effective. I'm guessing there's something to that extent. I imagine he still had the chip and had to go through Order 66 because those that didn't were dealt with, or they're in the process of being dealt with, right? So I don't think he would be in the arm. He still wouldn't be in his position still if that was a thing. I don't think he'd be faking it by gunning down a Jedi general or anything like that. So, so from that respect, I'm curious to see where they take that. And it was refreshing though to see a clone with, a human aspect to them again.
Yeah, personality. A bit of humanity again.
Because even the Bad Batch did, with all of them, and while they're very expressive, they don't always have a whole lot of, I don't know, empathy and redeeming quality, or not redeeming qualities, but you know what I mean? They just feel different. They still feel, they're very militaristic. They're not always very caring. They're developing in that respect.
Yeah.
But Hauser's kind of already got this kind of vibe to him, right? That he's got this soft spot that he'll do what needs to be done and follow the orders, which we see later on, but the hesitation that we see with him and the ability, what was really interesting though, is that the guys around him were along with it.
Yeah.
I think he had like 3 or 4 clones with him, and they all just kind of went off on their own too. Otherwise they would have been reporting each other like they've been doing everywhere else. So it was really interesting. So I'm curious what goes on with Hauser and maybe anybody else around him in that squad, if they decide to explain that.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is probably them, if he's their commander and he says, hey, we're not going to press charges, we're not going to take them in, they're going to follow orders and they'll probably fall in line. They may not agree with it, but right. That's, if it's his decision, it's his decision. So that's probably part of it. But you're right. I mean, it is very different than,
and we can't use the whole kid excuse either, right? Because we saw what happened with Kanan. So we can't, so there's a lot of inconsistency here. So I really hope they come back and revisit this and they don't leave this hanging, because I think this is a big disconnect that needs something of an explanation.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember on whether or not they killed Saul Guerrera's people on Oberon, or not Oberon. Where were they at? I forget the planet now that they went to. But remember, when he flamed them, when he torched them, they killed those people. I'm trying to remember if there was a kid in there. It's not. Really
well, they did in the very first time when they didn't follow orders. When Crosshair was still with the team. When they went back, though, the kids were not there. Neither were the old people. It was just, they still had women and men, but they were all of fighting age.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Well, all right. So Gobi, tells her that,
he admits to it.
He admits to it, right. That this is what's been going on. He did use her, I guess. I don't know. He didn't really use that word, but he knows what he did, right? Mm-hmm. And she makes a comment to, she pulls Hera inside and is kind of talking to her about this. And she makes that comment about, hey, you went out to what was it, the factory or
Refinery, yeah.
the refinery. And she's like, I never mentioned that I went to the refinery, which, you know, then Hera is quick to say, well, I've got my ways of knowing things too.
Eleni does, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Mom, yeah.
The mom, yeah, Eleni. And when she said that, I thought, okay, well, then she's probably behind a lot of this stuff. It feels like she is, if she's not driving it,
She's in the know.
she's in the know, right? And that's because of Gobi, right? They're probably talking, but she seems to be okay with it. Like, I don't, maybe not with Hera going out, but she seems to be okay in siding with Gobi and at least not preventing it or stopping it. So
Right.
I don't know.
We heard this from her earlier too, where she will always do what's best for Ryloth. That was her answer when they were the very first confrontation with Rampart, when Todd didn't get the response he wanted, or that he was uncertain about things, and Rampart started talking with Cham's wife immediately, and then he asked Cham if she supported his wife's opinion about that, but her response was that, you know, she'll do whatever's right for Ryloth. You can tell she's not comfortable where this is at either, and she's more of a realist, so she's kind of in between what Gobi is trying to accomplish and what Cham is trying to accomplish, because she sees the value on both sides. She really wants to support her husband and what's best for the planet, best for the system, whatever it is. But she's also seeing these lines that they're drawing. There's mistrust and distrust already looming everywhere. That people are not happy. They have tension in their own house, right? From all of this, they have tension in their own extended family. And she keeps calling him Uncle Gobi, but it sounds like they're just friends, and he's a kind of uncle of the family.
He's a close family friend.
Yeah, best friends and things like that. So it was but you can always tell she's not interested in this either. But she's got this, and then Cham calls her out on it later. You know, I hear Gobi's voice in your thoughts, or thoughts in your voice, or whatever it was, and so she clearly is, sneaky, and she's got that sly little smile. I liked it. It was good.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we would expect, right? I mean, those are traits that did get passed down to Hera, because she's very much like her mom in a lot of ways, and like her father, and a lot like Gobi now. So we've got three people that have influenced her in that regard. There's the moment there where Cham and Gobi are kind of going back and forth, and Gobi makes a good point. You know, hey, if this is, you know, if it's, why would it be spying? What if, you know, what do they want us not to see? Right. And he's right. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to just kind of go look at things. And so then they get into this whole thing about, you know, he's trying to, you know, Cham's trying to make a case for why they don't want to ruffle the Empire's feathers. And again, it goes back to him really trying to balance this fine line, or balance on a fine line here between, you know, putting his family at risk of the Empire coming again, you know, striking them, or going into war again, and, you know, finally having peace. I mean, later on, they even mention, someone mentions that peace was, I think it was Gobi that mentions, or someone says peace was always Cham's vision. It was always his dream, right? So he's finally got this opportunity to kind of bring peace to his planet, to himself, to his family, and he's doing whatever he can to make sure that, you know, the tides aren't going to tip, or he's going to, you know, again, not take the Empire off, but
kind of the Anakin Skywalker way of thinking about things,
right? Yeah,
for a time,
which never turns out, you know, really well.
Usually a pretty fiery end.
Yeah, and this really goes against that. What was it? Gobi says, or no, Cham says, "What's the point of fighting if we can't accept peace?"
That's a great point too, though.
Right? And it is a good point, but that calls to question what we said earlier on at the very beginning, was this is really about what's, you know, too far. How much is too much? And yes, that's a very true statement, right? But at what cost? And I think that's what really gonna kind of what it comes down to with this episode, and probably this arc, is at what cost is this piece going to?
And that's what Gobi calls him out on. You know, he said they're up to something, even if you don't want to see it. And Cham knows he's trying to block that discomfort. He's really trying to set that aside and hope that things will just improve and get better if he just gives it more time. Just give me more time, you know. And then, but it's not going to. And he already feels that he's already up against a wall. And when they do the tour of the refiner later on, they already, you know, they kind of feel it firsthand, even though he's still defending it to the very end with his wife.
Mm-hmm. We get into where Ta is, you know, he's speaking to Cham's influence here. He's getting real jealous about the fact that, you know, all these people are following him, and, you know, he's the Marsha kind of person. That's an old reference for you.
And what's really interesting though is, Ta really says that, and he's saying this to Rampart and Crosshairs in the room, that Cham and all of his supporters need to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. And this is a senator telling you about often people. basically. And maybe he could probably, I'm not talking about, extreme measures, but they need to be removed from power because they're in the way of progress and whatnot. But
Yeah, I think he would like them just locked up for like forever, like just out of the picture, not able to influence, like a Nelson Mandela kind of situation. Just put them away so that we don't have to worry about, people siding with them in uprisings.
right. Yeah. And Rampart, of course, has a really clever response. We each have our part to play, which, of course, anytime you get a line like that, it's going to come back at some point, which it does.
Does in this episode.
Yeah, it does. And of course, Crosshair is telling us that, well, Gobi Glee is really the one to be worried about. And so I wanted to ask you, is he right? Is it really Gobi Glee? Or is Cham really the one to be concerned about? So who's actually right here? Is it Ta or is it Crosshair?
I think
kind of on Ta's ship on this one.
Yeah, I think right now it's Gobi Glee, but it's about to become Cham. Like, and I don't want to get into this just yet because I want to talk about it a little bit later. But again, it's almost in this episode, Cham goes from, hey, I'm doing everything for my family and Hera first. First and foremost, it's Hera, right? He talks about that. And that's kind of where his focus is, and that's what he's doing. And again, he's willing to make sacrifices. Something's going to happen in this episode. It's likely Elena's going to die, or he's going to make a bad choice. Something's going to happen, horribly happen, and he's now going to shift his focus. The anger is going to get to him. The jealousy is going to get to him. And in my opinion, again, I'm just pure speculation. I think he's going to shift from everything about Hera to everything about destroying the Empire at any cost, right? And from that perspective, he now becomes more of a threat because he has the influence that he has. He's the one that's kind of pulling the strings for Gobi Glee, or maybe not right now, but now that those two guys are aligned, that's going to be bad news for the Empire.
Right.
And so right now, I think it is Gobi Glee. I think there is going to be something significant that happens, and it starts at the very beginning where they're going to be imprisoned. They're probably going to get broken out, and something bad's going to happen, and that's going to cause him to kind of really shift what his focus and priorities are. And I think that's going to be that driving wedge between Hera and Cham. I think he is going to get to the point where he's so obsessed, this becomes the whale, right, to Moby Dick, where all he can think about is taking down the Empire and seeking revenge, and that's not going to sit well with Hera, especially if she's being influenced by the Bad Batch and Rex and Omega. And again, I'm waxing speculation again, but if those guys are starting to influence her, this is going to be a very different threat a little bit later.
Right. Yeah. And SB had a good comment too, that he thinks that Helena is the one to watch out for. And I kind of bucketed it like this. Gobi Glee is the one who's actually going to go do something about it right now. Right. Mm-hmm. So is he the threat?
He's a man of action.
He's a man of action. Cham is the one with all the power though. He has the people. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you have Helena, who's in the middle, who is the one working in the shadows and things like that. And I agree with SP. Those are usually the ones you have to be really worried about because they can appeal to everybody. And they can actually make things happen and make them work out. I'm still kind of more in with Ta. I think that Cham, with the people around, with those people's support, he is the one who actually has power. Gobi Glee has the ability to take action and exacerbate that power and bring more of it. But he can also make things terrible for everybody at the same time. So he has this more of a chaos type of perspective to it, where Cham truly does have more power. It's kind of one of those things, you take the head out and if the people are lost and they don't know what to do. Now, Gobi Glee might still be there though. And then he does become more prominent in that. And maybe Elena in the background there too, or maybe she becomes the face of it, especially as like a widower or something. We know this is kind of all flip-flopped in reality, but these are the types of things going into it of what these guys are thinking. What might that threat be? And you also see is like one is looking at it from a military perspective and the other one's looking at it from more of a political perspective.
Yeah.
It's a difference of perspective there.
Right. Yeah, a lot of this episode and a lot of the themes in here are really about perspectives.
Certain point of view.
Certain point of view is heavy in this episode. Yep. We get the Cham and Hera conversation. She makes a great point. She's like, people don't seem very happy. Right. And this is true. I mean, we saw that earlier on.
Yeah, to your point earlier, change is tough. It's difficult. Hera, much like a lot of these people, have grown up in war. They've been around this for 7-8 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's really different. And to your point just a minute ago, Glee and Syndulla, Cham says they want the same thing, but they just have different ways of getting to that place. And I don't know that I completely agree with that entirely. I think Glee sees the writing on the wall. He's a bit more of a realist, that the Empire is not going to go away by negotiation or by allowing them to do what they want. They will just take what they want, and they will take and they will take and they will take. I don't view that they have a different approach for it. I think it's just that Glee is he's just got a more realistic assessment of it. And Cham is delusional at this point.
Yeah. They're, and I think from that perspective, so again, about perspective, what they both want is peace, right? And that's so high level, right? It's so,
sure.
It's very
subjective too.
Very subjective, right? What does peace mean? And that's where I think they did disagree. For one, it's peace means we're not at war, and whatever cost that may be. And for Gobi, it's, hey, we're at peace, but no one's, we're not over anybody. No one's ruling over us, and no one's stripping our resources of our planet.
And they're self-sufficient. They can take care of themselves. Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's exactly what that's where it is. That's what the bottom line. It's very similar to somebody like Saw Gerrera and Princess Leia, or Saw Gerrera and Mon Mothma, right? During that era, they both want the Empire gone. How they're going about it is completely different, right? There's certain lines they will and will not cross.
Right.
Sort of.
Right.
And or throws a wrench in that a little bit. But but that's the point. You get my point. Mm-hmm. And Hera is willing to fight. Like Gobi trusts her completely, more so than her dad. And I think you had the question, why doesn't her dad trust her? I think a lot of it is just based on the fact that Gobi does more things with her. He's able to see. It's kind of like Omega, right? She's earned his trust, and he's willing to put her in positions of responsibility, and she seems to be okay. Well, I mean, she got caught in this episode, but aside from that, she's probably established some kind of a good credibility and respect there. So, willing to take a chance there.
Yeah, I mean, Cham just wants more for his daughter, though, too. You kind of feel for him. I mean, he doesn't want her to have to live like this, because there should be more to life. She should be able to carve the life she wants, rather than be thrust into a life that you're kind of forced in these roles that you're forced to take.
Yeah.
In these leadership type of roles. And I think then back in Rebels, Cham actually says to Hera, you've everything he learned about leadership, he actually learned from her. Now granted, very different stages of where we're at with all of this right now, but it's just an interesting shift in perspective. And I think as parents, we see this sometimes where we're teaching our kids so much, and then our parents will tell us at some point, well, yeah, but now I'm starting to learn things from you, of what things are these days, or what what it truly means to be a parent, or what it means to be, a mother or father, that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, as parents, we don't always make the right decisions either. I mean, that's
very true.
Very clear in a lot of different things. Sometimes we make good decisions. A lot of times we make bad ones, and
sometimes you make bad ones with good intent, right? So
sure. Yeah. I mean, right. I think the intent is always there, hopefully. Right. But what's really tough is for us as parents to go back to the kid and say, hey, I screwed up. This wasn't the right decision, or I shouldn't have talked to you. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I shouldn't have made that decision, or I was, very emotional. And now that I've had a chance, we don't do that. And our kids learn from that, unfortunately. So not to get into that, because this is going to be a whole nother conversation, but yeah. So let's get to the tour of the refinery. Because it's interesting that he says, we're rebuilding parts of the galaxy affected by the war. This is Rampart talking about that refinery of Donium, which is total baloney. That's false. This is not the part. They're not rebuilding anything. They're actually mining this stuff because it's what's used for the Death Star, right? They're selling this off as, we're the war, and everybody's been war torn, and we've got to
putting them back to work, and we're the economy,
Right. Yeah, that's why they have the gun turrets up there.
Yeah, they've got the full-on Death Star gun turrets going on already.
Exactly, right out of the Death Star. We're going to use this model a little bit later. It was so successful on these planets, we're going to just slap them on the top of this space station.
We're going to use Ryloth as a papier-mâché to get the shape right here.
Papier-mâché. Good French term there.
Working on
episode that we're on.
Unikuna might be proud of me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so she believes, Eleni? I've already forgotten how to say her name now.
Eleni? Man,
Eleni,
we're terrible.
Eleni.
That's what you said was wrong.
I don't know. Did they ever say her name in this episode?
No, they didn't say her name at all. At all.
It's gonna kill me now. I thought I had it. You know what they do say it? They say it in the audio description.
Oh, okay.
But That guy also says
you can trust
Twi'leks.
that either.
No, he says Twi'leks.
So does Ta. So does Ta.
I don't.
Ta
Does
calls
he
them
really?
Twi'leks.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, this is gonna throw.
Well, this is like the whole
kill me.
Marchion thing. So the book, so Rising Storm, Marchion Row again. Even though Charles Soule continues to tell us it's Marchion Row. Anyway, we shall stop this conversation and move back to the Bad Batch.
All right. So Eleni.
Eleni.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just go with that. Eleni. Cham and her are having this conversation, and she says that she believes that Rampart's values are the Empire's interest over Ryloth. She kind of sees through the veil, right? This is not the disguise. They're not doing anything but for themselves. They don't really care about Ryloth. She's 100% right. We know that.
Right.
And this is where she makes that comment of like, "Hey, you're starting to sound like Gobi, and you're starting to sound like a separatist." That's what I thought of when that whole Anakin line when he's talking to Padme. But yeah, I mean, it calls the question, like, again, what are they trying to get here, and at what cost, and we're going to see all of that here in just a little bit.
And he had a great follow up. He just wants people to try. You lose. You can't take any of the opportunity. You can't get anything if you don't try. You have to put the effort to do it. But she has a really good comeback to this. What if the Empire's version of peace isn't one that they can accept?
Mm-hmm.
And he's just still got the earmuffs on. He still doesn't want to hear it. He wants it so bad. And I think he wants it more than his family. I think he really does want it for the planet, but he just can't be this dumb. And I think he's just trying so hard to be different and to be that different leader. And I almost feel really bad for him, actually, but he's just kind of doing it to himself at this point.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, his intentions are good. He's in a level of disbelief, right? I mean, he's suspending disbelief and trying to put his head in the sand and pretend like this is really not happening when he knows it's inevitable. But he's doing what he thinks is best. He's trying to do his best job, but
he's kind of doing the only thing he thinks he can do. I think on some level.
Yeah.
They don't have any weapons left, so what the hell are they else going to do?
Yeah, right.
Throw sticks at him?
Maybe.
All
Speaking of weapens.
Oh, you mean a supply run?
Yeah, we got to get a supply run going here. So this is where Gobi and Lenk is her name, Lenk.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, I forget her name now, but she's the same voice actress that does Princess Leia in the Forces of Destiny episodes, and then she was, I think, either Admiral or Captain Bragg from this series a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay.
I forget her name, but she's done like this is her third voice.
There's a lot of voice actors who are rotating through the characters here.
Yeah. But Link, Gobi and Hera jump into that ship, which is a cool design. It almost looks like the Mandalorian, like the Razor Crest.
Oh my god! And when they land on the moon, just the cinematography, just the scene there, was just beautiful. The planet in the background. It was just I just stared at it for a few minutes when I was taking screenshots.
And we also learned that the Gobi, he entices her. Like she's like, I'm not supposed to go out there. Chopper's with her. I'm not supposed to jump on. I'm grounded essentially.
Was gonna let you fly.
He's like, yeah, I was gonna let you fly. Oh, okay, well, never mind. And then she's like, Chopper, cover for me. Of like all people, why that guy? That guy is. I mean, he does a good job. I'm not.
Yeah, he was like, he was on board.
Oh, he's my favorite droid still, by the way.
My favorite droid is Tech.
I'm biased. Oh, harsh.
Tick.
Eek. So, but yeah, we get a chance to see her fly. She can't land. We learned that.
Well, he won't let her. Yeah.
Yeah, not yet. Maybe there's foreshadowing there. Maybe she's going to land something that was impossible to land. I don't know. Who knows? But all right. Well, let's cut to the only time that we do see the core of the Bad Batch, if you will. And before that, we should mention that Crosshair throws that little surveillance, that tracker on the ship, and that's how he's able to kind of follow him a little bit later when they land and all that. But when they get to this moon planet, that's when the Bad Batch come in. And I wasn't expecting. Well, I mean, I knew they were going to be the ones delivering the weapons, but I thought, okay, here from this point on, they're in the episode, and they weren't. Like 2 minutes later, they're off and about. I think SP brought this up, and I would have to agree. That interaction between Hera and Omega was like some of the best ever. There was just so much in that, and what they were talking about, and the way they were playing off of each other, that I would really hate if this was the only time that they're ever together, and that Hera is not a part of this later or comes back as a reoccurring character in some way. But I think we need more of those two ladies doing something. I have a suspicion that she is going to Hera. Again, this is just pure speculation. I have no reason to believe it, and nothing to go off of other than just my own fanboying here. But I hope that Hera gets to fly the Havoc Marauder, and she lands the Havoc Marauder, because I think that would be pretty special, and it also would set Omega up to be able to, like, because she says Tech won't let her fly until she learns everything inside and out. But
Right.
I'd like the fact that they be kind of learning from each other in that perspective. But what did you think about the scene, though, overall? I mean, it was pretty quick. There wasn't a lot there. I mean, yeah, they were exchanging weapons, but that really wasn't what the scene was about. It was more about Hera and Omega interacting and having that historic presence.
Yeah, I really like it's this different perspective on things where Omega is just reciting, tech thing after tech thing after tech thing, what the ship is all about, and Hera's blown away. But then it goes in reverse too, the other way around, where Omega, the way that Hera describes flying is this very emotional and very fluid and very natural, type of thing that's just a part of who you are. And Omega's just wowed by it. I mean, Tech is too. When she asks him, did you know flying was about a feeling? Tech's like, what feeling? But I kind of love that guy so much.
He's so dry.
Right. But no, this was such a great thing. I just like the vision of it and the way that Hera describes it. And then Omega is just so funny. The scene alone was just where all the humor was at for me, And so she's like, "Let me show you my favorite space on the ship," and it finally confirms what we believed was true, right?
Yeah.
So her bedroom is the gunner's mount, and her comment was, "We're not getting chased or shot out. That's my room."
Yeah.
Oh
my
gosh,
very kid-like. Like, no big deal, right? Whenever my life is not threatened, I get to sleep here and play here.
Oh, I laugh so hard.
Yeah.
I also laugh so hard because in the show notes, folks, I actually type Omega every single time. I don't type Omega. I type Omega.
Yeah, he forces us to say it.
I do. I need to add that to the dictionary, actually. Let me do that. So it stops giving me squiggly lines.
Yeah, it's not spelled correctly. No, it is.
But no, I agree, though, and I agree with SP. This is a really, I don't know if I'd call it powerful, but it was very touching, and I thought it was a really interesting way for these characters to connect. I thought it was really cool what they did to this, and to have Hera get to describe what flying really means to her in more detail, with Omega, who's so impressionable and really has only had this very, her entire life, not only just with the Bad Batch, but just this very utilitarian way of looking at things, this very clinical way and technical way of doing things, very boxed, and to have this all of a sudden very, what's the word? Just, this amorphous type of thing. And it's just fluid. And it was really cool to see that. And it's going to be interesting to see if that has any kind of impact on Omega as we go on.
Yeah. I haven't seen any talk about, well, there was talk about this during Rebels. Quite a bit, actually. Almost every season, there was something that popped up and it came up as a conversation point or conversation topic. But whether or not Hera is force sensitive or force attuned in some way, because the way she describes flying almost describes a force sensitive or force attuned. And or you can use different words. I'm not saying she's Jedi, she can levitate stuff, but we know there are people that are just connected to the force in some way, and it kind of manifests itself in the ability to do things that are just slightly above, the average person, almost at the Jedi level, if not surpassing the Jedi level. And I don't want to rob her of just being an amazingly gifted, pilot. I don't want to take that away. In fact, I want to ask Becca this question because I know she's a huge Hera nut. But I want to get her thoughts on this because it's just, if she hadn't described it the way she did and what flying was like to her, I would have never really I've never put any thought into it or gave it any credit. But now I hear that and I'm thinking, well, maybe not. Maybe she does have some kind of connection that's never really been explored before. And this is kind of the origin, and it's Dave Filoni kind of telegraphing that, hey, there's probably something more here. But at the same time, again, I don't want to cheapen the fact that she's just an amazing pilot like Han Solo. We know he's not force sensitive. He's not attuned to the force, but
even still, some of the things he says, it's just a bunch of, tricks, right? and gimmicky things that he tries and does. But where does it come from? He's never really described flying though. But I agree with you. It's kind of like this thing that's just passing through her, and it's just, yeah, it's I don't want to call it emotion, but it's just this energy that passes through. I think it's a fantastic way that she described it. I'm with you. It certainly begs the question, or puts it out there that, and I don't think it cheapens. I don't, if you have the Force, I don't know that cheapens your ability though at all. I think I mean, most people would probably view that makes you more special in some ways, but I don't know that I would call her. It would diminish her abilities at all if she had a touch of the Force. Well, I almost had a touch of the Force in her, and that would have been very inappropriate.
Yeah,
because Kanan fixed that problem.
So here's so you said it's okay. So I'm going to give you one more thing to think about.
Sure.
So the line, and I don't have it in front of me, but to paraphrase what Hera says is essentially that the controls, or I think it's Omega, I forget now who it was, but something along the lines of the controls are there to help you, but you got to feel it, right? When I heard that, it reminded me of A New Hope, where Kenobi is teaching Luke Skywalker about the Force. And he keeps telling her, you got to feel the Force. Okay, we have Hera saying she feels flying. And then Luke says, what? So you mean it controls your actions? And he says, partially, but it kind of,
obeys your
commands.
Yep.
And so when I think of that, I think of this as a parallel to, like, this conversation seems like a parallel to that, only you're replacing, the Force is still there, but you've got controls and you've got things that are working for you, but really it's, something that's non-tangible that's kind of doing it all at the same time.
I hadn't put that together. Yeah, I hadn't put that. That's fantastic, actually. I'm on board with that. 125%.
Okay, all right.
Maybe next time it'll be 130. But
you don't understand percentages, but yeah, okay, that's fine. No,
I'm extra on board.
Extra on board.
I'm all the on boards. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't put that. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's actually a fantastic way of viewing it.
Well, thank you. The only other thing that came out was Hunter. He makes that comment. So going back to that conversation that's happening outside the ship, he says, building an arsenal attracts attention. And I think that is foreshadowing, right? I mean, I think they're kind of, again, explicitly saying, okay, someone's going to get wind. Well, I mean, they do in this episode, right? Yeah. I mean, they find out that they brought in the legal arms, but maybe this speaks to a larger presence that's going to show up at some point. But we'll see. And I go, ooh, sorry about that. Loud noise here. Yeah. And so they fly off and we don't see them again. However, they'll be back. And we'll talk about speculate on how they do. They come back into Ryloth and they've got an Imperial shuttle. I'm going to kind of speed this up a little bit because we're kind of getting way over on time. But there's an Imperial shuttle chasing them. Crosshair takes out the engine, which, I mean, if it was anybody else, I'd be like, no way. Oh, outside of Mando.
I like it too. I mean, you actually saw the art, the curvature of the shot too. I mean, it's showing you why he's the best, right?
Yeah. And they crash land, and Gobi, Link, and Hera, they're all captured. And then we get that prisoner vehicle that shows up, which looked very similar to the one from Rogue One. I don't know if it was the same. I'm late on this one. I haven't had a chance to do some of this research, but it did look a lot like that one, which would be really cool. Or maybe the ones from, wasn't there one in Mando too?
It's like it's more like that one. It's like these transport tanks.
Okay.
Yep.
And so they show up. So Admiral Rampart shows up, Senator Ta shows up, and Ta says that, hey, because Hera's now involved, that there's they can indict Cham, and it's at this point Hauser is starting to feel really uncomfortable about all this, right? I mean, even Cham says, like, hey, she hasn't committed a crime. When they find out about this, I think Chopper is the one that kind of comes back and lets them know that she's been brought up on treason charges, and like they didn't even give her a trial.
Yeah,
we all know
guilty. Yeah, she's already guilty of treason. Yeah.
And we know this is all part of the setup, right? They're trying to get all this. This is all kind of an elaborate plan that Rampart has put together. But yeah, I mean, Hauser is the one that, again, this is where he says, "Sir, she's only a child," and Ta says, "No, she's an insurgent. Take her away." And he's struggling with this, which again, I can't see anybody who's still affected by the chip, if he was ever affected by the chip, being able to or stepping up like this and defending her, because he has really no reason to. I mean, outside of the fact that, we talked about earlier, there's probably a family presence there, but I mean, how strong is that when you've got somebody like Rex turning on Ahsoka, or Wrecker turning on his own, Bad Batch men? I mean, that's a pretty strong relationship, and they couldn't fight it. So how would he be able to?
Exactly. Yeah. And we see Rampart, because this happens again when they're on the transport, when they try to come and save them. And nice job, man. The but yeah, Rampart is just kind of watching, and he's looking very curious at Hauser. So Hauser's drawing attention that he doesn't necessarily want. That I don't know that he knows what he wants, but it was just interesting that Ta keeps being the one to jump in, and Rampart's just kind of cool, just sitting back and just watching them and how each of them are going to react. And I think he's got his eyes on Hauser at this point.
Yeah. Well, okay, we'll come back then here. I got another question for you, but wait, I'll table it. This is where Crosshair says they've got 3 more people on. He's like, do you want me to take care of them? He's like, nope. Just, you've got
to report back.
Yeah, let them report back. I mean, this is all, again, part of the plan. And this is the whole treason piece of it. And they take off to go try to rescue her at this point. And I get, this is a big turning point. Right. Yeah. I mean, this is their daughter. They're not going to stop. But this, I think, is kind of the beginning of, I think, what's going to force Cham into really having to change his mind and opinion of the Empire.
I tell you what, he swung hard too. I mean, he swung hard and fast to where especially when he's staring down Ta at the very end. I mean, that's not the same guy we saw 10 minutes earlier in the episode.
Yeah.
And so it was just, you could just tell how close to the surface it's all been bubbling for him for a while. The frustrations and all of the corruption he's had to witness and everything else. And for him just to go that quickly, and granted it's his daughter, but the extent that we see this go over the next few minutes was quite the swing.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, this is, it's your kid. So,
mm-hmm.
I mean, what are you not willing to do? Right. But, you have Cy Blurgs as one of the show notes here.
I told you, man. Cy Blurgs.
I didn't think we'd see Blurgs.
I didn't either. I mean, they make sense. It's fine.
But we did.
I just kind of sighed. I didn't have a problem with it. I just sighed. Anyway, Cham's a badass.
What do you say that?
Oh, he had that staff, and he was just knocking clones off of speeders, and I mean, he was just taking care of business.
Yeah,
I mean, he's serious. And then, you want to say her name this time?
Eleni.
Eleni, yeah. Dude, she was shooting from up on the cliff, taking out speeders from down below after just like 2-3 shots.
She did miss, but you're right. Like, she hit people from like way the heck up there, which is fine. Like, I'm down with it. Right, it's Hera's family, so.
But it was interesting though that but we see that Cham is actually intentionally stunning them at this point. And
I think he's still holding on, right? I think he's still like,
exactly,
man, I know this is tough,
still
and
holding on,
right?
Be more dramatic.
For him, it's like, God, I really don't want to kill these guys because we've got peace and
still salvageable. We can still save this. It's going to be all right.
And Leni's kind of like,
nope.
No, we're killing everybody.
That's what we should just call her Leni. That'd be easier. Yeah, Leni.
Yeah, I think all that was great, and this is again eye candy for the most part. I mean, just the shadows and the fact they're in this trench and there's dark and there's light. I mean, the
speeder bikes with the lights.
Oh yeah, the sounds are really great too. I mean, they lifted that
right
whole speeder sound right out of the Jedi Endor scene. Like, you can hear it every just that whole 2-second, 3-second segment is straight off of that. Yep. Oh, I know what you're doing. Great. There. I got that. Let's see.
They stormed the tank.
Yeah, they come in the tank, and so Rampart is like, oh yeah, we're going to surrender. And I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean surrender?
I want to survive.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Right.
I lost my. Oh, he makes that comment too about the. No, I was going to make a joke because there was a comment. There was a part in there where I think it's Link or somebody takes that almost like a syringe, and she hits it in there and jams the comms. And I thought, jamming the comms can only mean one thing, right? Invasion.
Right. Invasion. Right.
Which it turns out to be true. They invade the little shuttle there. This is getting kind of silly. I apologize. So yeah, Ta accuses all of them as far as being traitors at this point. They were smuggling, Crosshair tells them, hey, they were illegally smuggling weapons in. This is a big no-no since they had just taken all the weapons away. And, this is at the point where Cham's just had enough of all the threats to his daughter. And says that, he's continuing that Taz continue to put himself in front of everything rather than, the good of the people and the will of the people here. And then he he crosses a line to some extent, right? And I really question why he would have even done this. Like, he's going to
right in front of Hera.
Exactly. Like, he's going to cold murder maybe he wasn't. Maybe it was just an idle threat. But I mean, Eleni thought it was real enough that she had to jump in and actually grab the blaster and pull it down to stop him.
Right.
So
that's what I was saying earlier. He swung really hard.
Yeah,
like to this. I mean, maybe it's one of those things that like you threatened my daughter. Like, really? You're going to bring a kid into this?
Oh, like a taken kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Where it's just you snap of sorts. And that was about the only way I was able to kind of come to terms with it, of it going that quickly and that harshly. Because it looked like he had murderous eyes in that moment.
Well, and Hauser, of all people, again, sees it and tries to intervene. And you brought up a good point. I didn't even catch it. He calls him Cham. He doesn't call him General, doesn't call him anything. It's like he calls him by his first name on a first name kind of basis thing.
Several times in the episode, yeah.
Yeah. And trying to reason with him like, hey, this is not you. What's going on here? I mean, this guy had snapped at this point. Thankfully, he backs down.
Right.
But that's enough, of course, for Crosshair to take that shot. And this is where I think as Eleni tells him that, hey, Ta's time will come. And that's when he finally realizes, holy crap, I'm acting like an idiot here. My daughter's sitting here watching all of this.
Right.
And then right before he takes a shot, this is the callback to, was it Rampart says, thank you for playing your part, Senator. The callback to, hey, we all have our part to play in all of this. And this is where Crosshair kills him. Maybe
he's real subtle too. Gives him the nod and like everybody looks.
Yeah. Like, what's going
everybody
on
literally looked, and right in the side of the head. I was like, what?
Okay, so here I got the question that everybody's, and I know it came up already in our chat tonight, but whether or not Ta is dead. Did he really kill him? Because later on he says that they're going to bring them up on charges of
the attempted assassination of one free Ta.
Attempted assassination. So is he dead or is he alive?
Well, I mean, if you believe that, then he's alive. But man, he's got one thick skull. If he looked pretty dead on a gurney, not moving. So I don't know. I think he's dead. I'm gonna go with dead, even though they said attempted assassination.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that. Well, we don't. They could have. No, shoot, I don't know either. Here's the thing.
Does it do them damage to let it be known that Ta is dead? Does that do anything for unsettling the Senate or anything like that, or shifting power to where it's better to just acknowledge that, or to ignore the fact that he is dead, but just claim that he's just injured and just out of the public spotlight?
I don't think that makes a difference one way or the other. I think personally, it goes back to what we were talking about even before we got on the main show, and that's canon versus non-canon. He shows up in Lords of the Sith, which takes place, I forget how many years after the Clone Wars, or the after, not Clone Wars, but the Revenge of the Sith. Okay, so if that book is still canon and they're not jacking with it and they're not changing it, then he's not dead. And so now you got to figure out, okay, so how do you explain him not being killed by a headshot? And the way I think you could explain that, like it or hate it, is maybe Rampart told Crosshair, hey, shoot him here, because Twi'leks, if they're hit here, this is kind of like their appendix area where it's like, yeah, they're going to fall down, they may go unconscious, but right there is probably okay. Just don't go over 2 centimeters to the left and you'll kill him. So maybe if anybody can take that shot, it's going to be Crosshair, right? He's got the capability and the chops to take a very calculated, strategic called shot like that.
Yeah, and Orphrey Ta's got lay coup to spare. So I mean,
he's got a lot to spare.
Yeah. So if they were hitting a less sensitive place, well, yeah, I guess maybe. But again, he was laying there pretty still.
So all that said, I think he's dead. And I wouldn't care either way if he was. I mean, they don't need him there. The people don't trust him. They could easily put somebody else in power, right? Get somebody that's willing to, be faithful more to the Empire than somebody like Ta, that they could empower and be a senator. They've got the means and the ways to do all of that. So I don't know that he has to be there, I guess is what I'm saying.
But you could have shot him somewhere else, though, I guess, right? You could have shot him somewhere else to injure him. And then you could say, okay, that was an attempted assassination. You just, yeah, Todd, no, we're cool, man. We promise we're cool. You're the guy for the job. You keep doing your thing. We'll keep doing ours. But Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no real. I can't even think a good reason as to why it could have been anybody. I mean, the fact that it's a center is certainly more powerful, is more impactful, but
Mhm.
there's no reason to think that Ta wasn't. Maybe that's part of it. Ta is not somebody that was going to go against the grain.
Exactly.
He was a company man. He was a puppet. He was doing everything that they were asking him to do. But maybe that makes it more powerful that the fact that they kill him, because now it looks like
Yeah.
because of those reasons, you know,
And let's face it,
Cham really wanted to get him.
Yeah, Rampart was probably sick of him anyway.
True.
I have a feeling that was probably 80% of it. God, this guy's annoying.
Yeah.
You just cap him. But
Well-
still, Blaster of the Head was still kind of a WTF moment. Like, are you serious? I guess we're back to headshots and chest shots.
Well,
how
and
we missed you after 2 episodes.
right. So, and that's because we brought that up last episode about, stun versus getting shot and killed. Again, I think it just depends on the situation. I don't think there's a message here
Right.
from anybody. It's just whatever suits the story, I think, is kind of what they're going for at this point. So, but I guess the big takeaway here is Hauser, right? Hauser was against all of this. He was trying to intervene before it happened. After it happened, he's in shock and disbelief. He can't believe it's happened. These are not characteristics you would expect of a clone that's been, subjected to Order 66 or still under the influence of Order 66. And so I think that will continue to kind of develop here in the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, like I said, Rampart's watching Hauser. But Rampart orders him to go and find Hera. And you can see that he's very conflicted with this order about what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of where it's going to go, because at that point we cut over to, I think, Hera just leaving, and Chopper's taking her out.
Getaway car. Yeah.
The getaway car. It's reminiscent of that speeder that the droid was driving at the very beginning of the first episode of The Mandalorian when they come around the corner.
Yep.
It reminded me of that. But yeah, so we realize this has all kind of been his plan. Right now, Cham has been set up. He's got every opportunity now to kind of put him on display, I assume, at some point in front of the public, and show them, have witnesses, start spreading false rumors, and
take away hope.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's all stuff that's going to happen. I wonder, we can kind of just segue into that last part of it here, really what we expect to see in the next episode or two. I really don't know how long this arc is. I know it's the next episode because of the title, which we won't talk about. But beyond that, I'm not sure how far it's going to go. But I guess my thoughts are, I think Hauser is going to catch up with Hera. I suspect that he's not going to churn her in. He didn't do it before. I don't think he's going to do it now, especially knowing that, knowing that he didn't do what he's being accused of. Right. I think that doesn't sit well with him, and so I think he's actually going to take her. And I assume he's got some kind of contact with Rex. Hopefully, that'd be really cool.
That would be crossing some streams then.
Why is that?
Because Hera and Rex hadn't met until Rebels, right?
I don't. I think that's true. There's nothing that makes us think that they. I don't know. I have to go back and look at that, read that, or watch that. I don't recall.
Yeah.
If they did, they didn't make a big deal about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But he's got to do something with Hera. So maybe he just goes to the Bad Batch. That's probably the easiest path. How he gets there means he's going to have to hook up with Gobi, because Gobi is the connection to the Bad Batch, right? So maybe he takes her under protection, takes her to Gobi, realizes that
Gobi's in prison, right? So they've got to break him out.
Well, okay, you're ruining it.
This is why I'm here. We all have our part to play.
we all have our part to play. Okay, so it's the next episode.
So somehow, right. So somehow they've got to get news over to Sid, probably, to hire the Bad Batch, the A-team, to come back in and do some extraction and some stuff, right?
Right.
I think we're both on the same page. Something along those lines has to happen. So Hauser seems to be the catalyst for that, and it probably comes back to getting that information from Gobi, because Gobi's the one in contact with Sid, right?
Correct.
So that seems so something there. They've got to get to there.
And if I had to name the next episode, I would expect it to be some kind of a rescue on Ryloth, but I don't know what I would call the episode.
Wow.
Wink, wink, nod, nod. Yep. All right. Sorry, I was trying to dance around that. You're like, well, they got to rescue him. I'm thinking, okay, well, cat's out of the bag. That's
No,
no,
I didn't name the episode, but
no, I didn't
natural.
either.
It's
Why would you
natural
think
though,
that?
right? I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I just showed up. I wasn't even supposed to be here today.
Here's one thing I'm excited about. I want to see Chopper with like Wrecker or Chopper with the Bad Batch. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like he
boy.
seems like he'd fit in.
Him and Wrecker would be so much fun.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Like I can't.
I
wait
like him.
I like him. I kind of want to see that. I'm hoping we get some of that. Other predictions. I think I mentioned Hera flying the Havoc Marauder or flying something, landing something, right? Paying, kind of having that big payoff there.
Another happy landing.
Yep. Another happy landing. You had a good question in here about whether or not Hauser's still loyal. You know, who's he loyal to at this point? And I don't know that he knows. I mean, I think he's loyal to the Syndulas, and I think he's loyal to the Order. That's the thing. It feels like he's still part of the old guard, like the actual clones. That's where his loyalty is, and this is not sitting well with him because he is that. Now, how he gets there, I don't know. Again, faulty chip's starting to wear off. Never had one. Wasn't under the influence. Rex talks about some of I think Rex said it. There were some troopers that didn't it didn't click with them or whatever it was. I forget the term he used. So maybe he is so removed. He's been on Ryloth this entire time. He's not privy to some of the horrible things that the Empire is doing. And in his little sector of the galaxy, everything's just fine outside of, the Empire coming in, and they're coming in under the guise of, oh, we're bringing jobs and we're going to bring stability and we're going to defend you, and I'm a part of that. So he has no reason to think that the Empire is anything but following through on what they promised, which was peace and prosperity. So that may be part of it. He may not be impacted, but he's not part of the evil part of it and doesn't see all of that happening.
Yeah, I agree. And what they're doing on Ryloth doesn't, like, on the surface, if you don't look into it too far,
yes,
then you're right. You don't really think that there's really anything negative going on. It's just the growing pains and some conflicts of personality and just this adjustment period. But yeah, I'm really curious to see where Hauser goes. He was probably the most interesting character in this episode, hands down for me. Leni was another one. I liked her quite a bit. We didn't get a whole lot of her, which is a bit of a disappointment, actually, considering that she seems really vital here, but we don't get a lot of her anywhere else either, though. She's really just mentioned in the other shows. And so that was a bit of a disappointment, because it seems like that character had some promise there, but really want to know where Hauser goes. So I'm happy that he seems to be the kind of the key and the catalyst for whatever this next step looks like.
Yep.
Bum, 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 bum,
yeah,
bum,
it's the A-team. They're coming in.
This is total A-team now. We are thick in the A-team now.
Okay, well, I think we've done this. We've killed this episode enough. That's kind of where it leaves off. I mean, it definitely is a 2-episode, potentially a 3rd episode, or maybe this all kind of comes back a little bit later. Maybe it's season 2. Just never know. Dave Filoni, I know we say the same thing every time at the end of the episodes, or these episodes, but it's true. Who knows? We'll see.
It's possible.
It's possible. Okay. Oh, anything else before we get out of here?
Huge thanks to all the people in the chat. We had Chris, we had SP, Steph. Goodness, who else do we have in there today? We had a bunch of people. I'm scrolling. Yeah, Bo and Risk Bayless was in there with us. Yeah, so we had another good turnout. We appreciate it, guys. I know there's probably some. Johnny was in there, of course, earlier today. So appreciate everyone showing up. We try to be live at some point on a night. So come out and join us on sometime in a night. We post it out there on Facebook and the YouTubes and all that. So stay tuned on the social media stuff. If you'd like to hear all the Patreon stuff that we're doing, we are trying to have things out there more regularly. So patreon.com/thecantinacast. Of course, Discord, igloomedia.com/Discord. Lots of fun conversations, both about Bad Batch as well as the in-print stuff. I'm really happy that the books are gaining a lot more notoriety and more attention in that space as well. Some folks are starting to finish up Rising Storm, so hopefully to get some fun conversations, but hopefully we'll get into it on the show here pretty soon, as well as everything else that's coming out. So would love for everyone to join us out there and just kind of join the party. It's a lot of fun.
Yep. Okay. Well, we'll be back next week with episode 379, which may or may not involve a rescue on Ryloth. We'll have to see.
We were just getting nice for Disney. Why do you have to? This is why we can't have nice things.
Oh, by the way, the update on the Gotan is I did not find one. I'm not giving up though. I did spend quite a bit of time not listening to Jonesy in this episode, and I don't take that personally, but I was so hyper focused on the Gotans.
Like every week though. How is this any different?
There's just one scene where Cham is standing there, and there's so many characters that I can't see them all. I'm gonna have to like take my glasses off because I'm old and spend
Right.
some time.
So it's Monday night, folks. If this episode isn't posted, Tuesday morning, it's because Albert is still up looking at this scene, trying to figure it out because he knows Waldo is in there.
Zoom. Enhance.
He's looking for the enhance. Yeah. On screen. Wait, wrong franchise.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
All
but
right,
yeah, that's the update.
Let's get out of here. Yeah.
Okay.
No Gotan so far, but
No Gotan.
Albert will give you the 8 a.m. update at our next incident meeting.
Will do. And I'm going to run the credits. This is all our Patreon folks. Thanks again, as Jonesy said, for all of your support. Ari, I don't have you in here yet, but I promise you will be here in the next one. So with that, we'll see you guys next episode.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.